This week on Lewis on the Law, I've got another great show for you. We're going to talk mortgage foreclosure. So go ahead and get out your old bank statements and take a seat and get ready to get informed.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and in the spirit of empowerment, we have another awesome show for you guys today. We're going to empower you by teaching you a little bit about the mortgage foreclosure defense process. Now, I'm really excited to have attorney Sarah Kelsey and Sarah Mancini on with me. They're from Atlanta Legal Aid, and they're going to talk mortgage foreclosure today. And you guys have a program called the Home Defense Program. Is that correct?
That's right, the Home Defense Program. Yeah.
Okay, so first, let's start off with a little bit about Atlanta Legal Aid. I know you guys are a nonprofit. Tell me something about Atlanta Legal Aid.
Atlanta Legal Aid was founded in 1924 by attorneys and community leaders, and its mission is to provide high-quality civil legal services to low to moderate income households in the Atlanta metro area. So we serve 5 metro counties: Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Clayton,
and Gwinnett.
Yep. Thank you.
The metro area.
Yeah,
The metro area.
Gwinnett's one of the big ones.
Yeah.
Got to get that in there.
I'm forgetting one. Types of cases that we take are landlord-tenant, family law, including protection orders from domestic violence, and consumer law. Am I leaving any out?
I think you've covered most of it.
that's
Really,
most of it.
everything. What I like to tell people is we do basically everything that's not criminal law. And it's free civil legal services for people who are within our income limits. So we have a variety of funders that allow us to provide those services to people who can't afford to pay for legal representation.
Okay, so there is an income limit.
That's right. And the actual limit depends on the program within Atlanta Legal Aid and your household size. But
Okay.
you have to be income eligible to get our help. That's right.
Oh, okay. So it depends. So I guess there's a bar, or there's a family size and an income limit, and that kind of sets the tone.
Yeah, it's based on the federal poverty level.
Okay. I think I did a
yeah.
lot of that with the IRS and offers in compromise.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes into play here too.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the Home Defense Program a little bit. Now, what exactly is the Home Defense Program? I know it's mortgage foreclosure. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the Home Defense Program has been in existence since the 80s. And basically what happened was there were a couple lawyers at Atlanta Legal Aid who started to notice a disturbing trend of people who were taking advantage of folks that were facing foreclosure. So actually the first type of cases that were handled in the Home Defense Program were something that we call a foreclosure rescue scam, where a company would come to a homeowner that was struggling and say, we're going to help you get caught up on your mortgage, sign here. And it turned out the person was signing over title to their home, thinking that they were just getting a loan, but they were actually giving up ownership of their home in the process.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
It is absolutely horrible. And it happened a lot in that time period in the 80s and 90s. Kind of went away for a while when people didn't have any equity in their homes, but it's coming back again. We see these types of scams even now. But that was really the inception of our project, was an attorney named Bill Brennan, who was at Legal Aid for 40-some years before he retired, and Karen Brown. They started the unit together working on these foreclosure rescue cases against a company called Brown Realty. And then that was the beginning. And from there, they expanded to handle a lot of other cases involving homeownership.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Georgia foreclosure law right now. What are the elements of the Georgia foreclosure law that you guys actually look at?
So the first thing to understand is that Georgia is a non-judicial foreclosure state. While we do have a statute on the books for judicial foreclosure, most foreclosures in Georgia are non-judicial, which means that the mortgage company does not have to file a lawsuit, and you don't have a judge deciding. You don't have the opportunity to file an answer.
Now, is that common? Is that common with states?
Yeah, about half of the states in the country have non-judicial foreclosure laws. They also, in each one of those states, have a judicial foreclosure process. But if a bank is given the choice, they're going to go with that non-judicial process because it's cheaper and easier for them. So yeah, it's about a 50-50 split between states that only allow judicial foreclosures and states that are fine with a non-judicial process.
Okay, so with a non-judicial foreclosure, what does that actually mean? I mean, you're not going in front of a judge. How does that happen?
So you, at the end of your security deed, you can look and see if there's a power of sale section at the end, that says they have the power to sell your house on the courthouse steps on the first Tuesday of every month without having to go through the judicial process. So
wait a minute. So a person they they're behind a couple of payments, and all of a sudden their house is on sale at the courthouse steps.
It's amazing. It's a really fast and easy process, and I think it catches a lot of people by surprise. So all the bank is required. One of the main requirements is that the bank has to notify you at least 30 days before the sale date by a certified letter, and that's it. And then the sales happen in Georgia the first Tuesday of every month, literally on the courthouse steps. People are out there calling out the houses and auctioning them to the highest bidder.
Oh my God, I can see how that would just be catastrophic to a family with no place to go, 30 days notice. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it is one of the most devastating experiences that a person can go through. And it absolutely, in states that only allow judicial foreclosure, at least you have the right to appear in front of a judge, present defenses and counterclaims, and there's more of a process. So it's really a tough thing for homeowners in Georgia that we do have such a fast process and there's no court oversight.
That's incredible. So because there's an income requirement for help from Atlanta Legal Aid, and most people who own their own home might have some type of income. I mean, what happens to those people who are like just a little bit above you guys, and do they just fall through the cracks? I mean, with no help? I guess they'd have to just hire an attorney who can do this.
Yeah, well, we encourage everybody to call us if you're in a situation where you're facing foreclosure, because our income limit in the home defense program is a little bit higher than the rest of legal aid for that very reason, that homeowners will be slightly higher income and might still be eligible for our services, especially if you have a larger household size. And if you're over our income limit, we will absolutely refer you to other attorneys, private attorneys that take cases low bono, we would say, like on a reduced fee, and nonprofits called housing counseling agencies, where it's not an attorney, but you can get help for free from someone who knows how to navigate the process of getting a loan modification, things like that.
Okay, so do you guys have a lot of people actually come to you? Is there a high volume here?
yes.
Yes.
We stay pretty busy. I think that's accurate. We, it's hard to give numbers, but I would say we have 5 attorneys in our unit and 3 paralegals. And we're all busy most of the time. And certainly a large number of the people who contact us for help, we're limited to just giving them advice and referrals. But even that, hour or so that we spend on the phone, I think it's a big service to people. And people find it really helpful to know what's happening next and their specific options. But we can't take for full representation a lot of the cases that come to us. We just have to limit the numbers that we can take.
Okay. So is there anything else I need to know about the Georgia statute here?
Yeah. Did you want to say a little bit more about the process with the, we talked about the 30-day letter.
There's also a requirement to place a legal ad in a legal newspaper up to 4 weeks before a sale, so it has to appear 4 times. And one thing I think is important to point out about the 30-day letter or 30-day notice that you get is that there is no requirement that you actually have to receive the letter. They just have to send it. It's sent by certified mail, and if the tracking number shows that they sent it, then they have met that requirement of the law.
Wait a minute. So they don't even have to receive? I mean, they don't have to. There's no requirement that they sign for it, and there's a signature.
That's correct. So if we tell people if there is a notice to pick up certified mail, go get it. You want to know what's going on.
Make sure you're opening all your mail. Don't put your head in the sand, because they've complied once they've sent the letter. And sometimes we get people who call in who say, they never sent me the letter. And we invariably find that the law firms that handle these cases, they send the letter. So it's like, is there something going on with your mail? Did you not pick up a certified letter? So that's absolutely right. I wanted to say one other thing about the 4-week legal advertisement. It's not in the AJC or the newspaper that most people get. It's run through the legal paper like the Fulton County Daily Report, the DeKalb Champion. And the purpose of that is to notify people who might decide to come bid on the property that this property is going to be up for auction. And so the upshot of that, what happens because of that, is people get a lot of junk mail. When your house is listed for foreclosure, there are companies and individuals who are skimming those ads, and they will spam you with every kind of mail. We can save your house, all kinds of promises. And we'll talk about this more later on, but you get a lot of offers that are too good to be true.
And if it's too good to be true, it probably is, huh?
Exactly.
Okay, we're coming up to towards the end of this segment. Why don't you guys give them just a little bit of contact information for Atlanta Legal Aid and this program?
Sure. So if someone needs assistance, you can contact the Office of Atlanta Legal Aid in the county where you live, or you can call the Home Defense Program directly at 770-817-7520.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I'm your host this week and every week. And Lewis on the Law is designed to be a first-step process. This show is not designed to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. What we're trying to do is we're trying to give you legal information, maybe your first steps, what to look for in the process, what to look for in an attorney. So we have a great show going here. We're talking mortgage foreclosure. That word is really tough for me to get out today. I don't know why. It's just, mortgage. But anyways, when we get back, we're going to get more into the statute. We're going to get into some other types of defenses and what you can do once you're in this situation. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week. If you have a legal question or some type of topic that you want to hear us talk about, go ahead and hit me on my website at jameslewislegal.com. You can email me at james@jameslewislegal, or you can give me a call at 404-610-0075. And if I don't know your topic, I can bring an attorney on who actually knows something about your topic and is willing to talk about it. If you need help from an attorney, don't listen to this show as your only source of advice or only source of information. Go ahead and contact an actual attorney. You can give me a call at 404-610-0075 or just drop me a line. And if I can't help you with your legal issue, I can help you find an attorney who can help you with your legal issue. A lot of the attorneys show up on my show, so I've got a pretty good network going. I am so honored to have attorney Sarah Kelsey and Sarah Mancini on with me. They are from Atlanta Legal Aid, and they are talking the mortgage foreclosure process or the mortgage foreclosure defense process. So we were talking about the statute, the Georgia statute when we left. What other types of things do we need to know about the Georgia statute first?
So I think we've covered a lot of the details, but just to be clear, one point we glossed over a little quickly is that the sales are done the first Tuesday of every month in Georgia. So that is the only day when foreclosure sales are conducted. And we mentioned the 30-day letter that the bank has to send a letter at least 30 days before the sale date. So if you're in default on your mortgage and you're worried about a foreclosure coming up, if you look at your calendar, you can kind of figure out, okay, if I'm partway into December, it's too late now for them to notify me of a sale the first Tuesday in January because they haven't sent the letter 30 days in advance. So you can look at what's the first Tuesday of the next month and what would be 30 days before that and figure out if it's still possible for the next month. But it really does move quickly under Georgia law. Okay.
So we've talked about that a little bit now. So what other things do I need to know here?
Well, there's also some federal law that applies. So I think it's worth touching on that. And we've mentioned that Georgia has a very fast and easy process, one of the fastest in the country. But there's also federal law that is kind of an overlay to Georgia law and puts some additional protections in place for homeowners. And most of the things we're going to tell you about are things that came out of the foreclosure crisis. So these were changes that happened in 2010 and later through something called the Dodd-Frank Act and regulations that were put in place under that statute because there were large numbers of people facing foreclosure on their homes. So Congress saw that there was a need for some additional protections. And then the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a federal agency, issued some rules under some existing federal laws to give people a little bit of protection when they're facing foreclosure. And I should mention that that agency, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, has a website, consumerfinance.gov, that has a lot of good information. So a lot of what we're talking about now, if you're interested, you can check it out at consumerfinance.gov. But part of what that agency decided to do was to put in place some rules to protect people who are trying to avoid foreclosure. And the main way, we'll talk about this in more detail as we go on, but the main way that people try to avoid foreclosure on a mortgage is to get something called a loan modification. So the CFPB, this federal agency, decided to put in place some rules that protect people who are applying for a loan modification because there was a problem known as dual tracking. And dual tracking is basically where the bank is scheduling a foreclosure on one hand, and at the same time, they're talking to you about a loan modification. And these two departments are just not talking to each other at all. So it can be going along two tracks, and obviously,
and that can be really confusing. You think, hey, I'm getting this taken care of. I'm dealing with this, and then next thing you know, your house is on the auction step.
Exactly. It's really, people think that because they're talking to me about a modification, they're not going to foreclose. But unfortunately, often they were doing just that. So these rules were put in place under a law called RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, that says that while you're applying for a modification, if you submit a complete application packet at least 37 days before a foreclosure sale date, the bank cannot foreclose until they review that application. So these are these dual tracking protections that basically they're all tied to getting in a complete application. So it's really important if you're facing the risk of foreclosure and you're talking to the bank and they're saying, well, we need proof of income or we need your bank statements or your tax return, that you get all that documentation in, because these protections do not kick in until you have a complete application on file. And the one other piece of it is they created a 120-day window of time when you first fall behind that the bank is not allowed to foreclose. So even though under Georgia law, we talked about it only takes 30 days, and once you miss a single payment under Georgia law, they could send you that letter and foreclose 30 days later. Under federal law, they are not allowed to initiate the foreclosure process until you are 4 months behind, 120 days behind, because they wanted to give people a breathing spell in which you could apply for a modification or figure out your options. And practically speaking, most banks were not foreclosing when someone was just 1 month behind. So the banks didn't really mind having this built-in period of time that's devoted to seeing if there's a way to avoid the sale.
Okay, and we're going to talk more about loan modification in a second, but let's back up a little bit and let's talk more about the statute, basically. So, when your home is for sale on the auction, what do? Do they come and just drag you out of your house?
No. So that's one common misconception, is that the day of the foreclosure sale you have to be out of your home, and that is not the case. The buyer at the foreclosure sale has to go through the dispossessory process. It's the same as landlord-tenant court. So we tell people, if your house was sold at a foreclosure sale, to check your mail and check your door every day, because the common way that you will find out about an eviction or dispossessory notice is by having the notice tacked on your door. And I also always tell people to check the mail as well, because the requirement is tack and mail, not just tacked on your door, but they also have to mail it, and it has to be postmarked the same day as that tacking. Once that happens, you want to file an answer, and the notice will say what your answer deadline is. I also tell people that it's a good idea to call the clerk of the court, the magistrate court, and just get an idea. Make sure you have your dates right, your service date, things like that. Then you will file that answer, and you want to file it as close to the deadline as possible, but not after. If you miss that deadline, then the buyer can automatically get a writ of possession, and the marshal can come and change your locks and put your belongings on the street. If you file an answer, and you have 7 days in Georgia after the date of service to file an answer, when you file an answer, you then get a hearing date, and it's usually another 7 days after you filed your answer, give or take a couple of days. And then at that hearing, you'll go in front of the judge. And it's very important you don't miss that hearing. If you miss that hearing, then the buyer can get an automatic writ of possession. If you go to that hearing, and even if you go in front of the judge and lose, you still have 7 days before the plaintiff can apply for a writ of possession. And another thing to know is that in most of these courts will allow mediation, or they'll allow you some time to talk to the plaintiff, go out in the hall, and you can sometimes come to a consent agreement with the buyer or plaintiff, and maybe give you 2 weeks to move out, or an arrangement to pay them rent and stay in the home, something like that. And that is something the judge can't give you, but you can work out in a consent judgment. Another thing that's important to know about those consent judgments is that you cannot appeal them. Once you agree to them, that's it.
Yeah, and I just want to dovetail on what Sarah is saying, is that it's a little confusing because we have non-judicial foreclosure, but then there is a judicial process for the eviction, and the eviction has to happen after the foreclosure sale date. So based on the deadlines that were just explained, you can get at least 3 weeks after you're served with the eviction to finish moving out of the house if you follow all those steps by filing your answer before the deadline, going to the hearing. And usually the person that buys the house at the foreclosure sale, which may be the bank or it may be an investor, usually they don't run right out and immediately file that eviction. Usually it takes a couple weeks. So typically after a foreclosure sale, you're going to have 3 to 4 weeks still to prepare to move, pack up your things.
Well, that helps a little bit. So they foreclosed on your house. They sold it. They sold it at the county courthouse steps, and they've kicked you out. Do you still have to pay the rest of that loan back?
That's an important question, and I think a lot of people worry about that, especially if your house is underwater, where maybe you owe more on the house than the house is worth or could sell for. That's really the only silver lining of our Georgia consumer law around mortgages. As we've said, the foreclosure process is very bank friendly here, but the one good thing we have is that after the bank gets to go through this very fast and easy process, they cannot come after you for any shortage or what we call a deficiency unless they go through a judicial confirmation of the sale to show that they sold the house for fair market value. And typically, for loans that regular people take out, think below $500,000, banks just don't go through that process. If they're going to go through that process, they have to file it within 30 days after the foreclosure sale, so you'll know if it's happening. But in the people that we've talked to, and I've been doing this work for about 11 years, I have never had a homeowner that was facing a judicial confirmation of sale. So that means that they do not owe the deficiency. Even if the house sold for less than what you owe on the mortgage, you're not going to owe that balance. You're going to get a fresh start and be able to move on and find another place to live without that debt hanging over your head.
That's pretty important. Now, we're at the end of this segment again, so why don't you guys give them some contact, give our listeners some contact information for Atlanta Legal Aid and the Home Defense Program.
Sure. So we have a website, which is www.atlantalegalaid.org, and that website contains the phone number for all of our offices and different programs. But you can also contact the Home Defense Program directly at 770-817-7520.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. I've got a great show going for you guys right now. We're talking mortgage foreclosure defense, and when we get back, we're going to actually get into the nuts and bolts of some of the defenses, some of the loss mitigation procedures, and maybe some loan modification. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week for 48 minutes to an hour or so. I don't know if you're keeping time, but anyways, I am your host. This is Lewis on the Law. I've got another 100% awesome show for you guys today. We are here to empower you, and there's nothing like empowering you on how to defend your home if something goes wrong. And I hope to God nothing goes wrong, but every now and then something does. So if it does, you need to listen to this show. I have Sarah Kelsey and Sarah Mancini, attorneys from Atlanta Legal Aid, on with me, and they are talking the Home Defense Program, which is a program that defends against mortgage foreclosure. Am I correct?
That's right. Absolutely.
Okay. And when we I think halfway through that last segment, you were talking about loan modification, and you threw a lot of information out there for our listeners. So why don't we go back to that and kind of talk about loan modification here?
Okay, so the first thing to know about loan modifications is that there are different programs depending on the type of loan that you have. So there are VA and FHA loans, and also loans that are owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So if you have a VA loan, you most likely know, because it's a very detailed and long process to get one. For an FHA loan, the way to find out if you have an FHA loan is if you look at the security deed, your mortgage documents, there will be an FHA loan number on the first page. And then for Fannie or Freddie, you just Google Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan lookup, and you put in your name and your address and the last 4 digits of your social security number, and it will tell you, yes, Fannie Mae is the owner, or no, or Freddie Mac. There's one website for each. Another way is you can ask your mortgage company, your servicer, and that's the company that sends your mortgage statements, which may be a different company that owns the loan. So a lot of times you get different companies. Look at the most recent mortgage statement and call that company.
And this is important because I think most people feel like the company that's taking their payment probably owns their loan. And usually that's not the case. And you have no reason to know that your loan might have been sold to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, for instance. But they actually own more than half of the mortgage loans that are made in our country. And so the company you're dealing with can tell you who owns your loan, or you can go through one of those steps to find out.
That's right. And one more note is that even if your loan is not owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, is not part of any government program, sometimes the companies themselves will have their own private loan modification program. So the way a loan modification works, the goal of a loan modification is to bring your loan current and to lower your monthly payments. And so the way that will work is it'll add the arrears, what you owe. So that's the missed payments as well as foreclosure fees, late fees, things like that. It'll add it into the balance of your loan. We call that capitalizing. And then in order to get to the goal of bringing you current and lowering your payments, the term could be stretched out for another 30 or 40 years. And sometimes the interest rates go up. Usually they don't. Usually they stay the same. Sometimes your interest rate will be lower. And another way that they can accomplish that goal is to add a balloon payment at the end, or a partial claim in the case of an FHA loan. So that is after the loan is paid off, there's this extra chunk of principal balance that isn't accruing interest that would be due at the time the loan is paid off.
Okay, so how does this loan modification work? You just contact the bank and then they start you through the process?
Yeah, that's basically right. You can start it by picking up the phone and calling your mortgage servicer, the company that sends you your monthly statements, the company that you've been making your payments to. If you call them and say, I'm struggling with my payments, I think I'm about to fall behind on my payments, or I'm already behind, they'll put you through to their department that handles these things. And usually that's called the loss mitigation department. And the one piece of advice that we wanted to be sure to convey, or an important piece of information, is that there are options to avoid foreclosure, but it's better the sooner you act. Basically, if you put your head in the sand or think there's no way to do anything, or I'm just going to ignore this problem and it'll go away, that's the worst thing you can do. You're better off contacting your mortgage company as soon as you start to fall behind on the payments, or even before you fall behind. There used to be this perception that you couldn't get a modification unless you were 2 or 3 months behind. That's definitely not true anymore. You can show that you're about to fall behind because you've just lost your job or something like that, or had a hardship, and they can allow you to apply for a modification.
Okay, so wait a minute. You just said even if you haven't fallen behind yet, you can go ahead and apply for modification?
Yeah, and that really is a great idea, or at the very beginning, as soon as you know you're going to fall behind. And the reason for that is it takes a long time. The actual process of applying for a loan modification is pretty intensive. There's a lot of paperwork. And unfortunately, what we hear from a lot of people who call us for help is that they've already faxed the documents multiple times. And I've been hearing this frustration for years as we've been seeing the foreclosure crisis play out, is that people will fax their bank statements, their pay stubs, a hardship letter, and then the servicer will often come back and say, we didn't get your fax, or we need you to resend it, and they're not clear about what was wrong the first time or why they need you to resend it. So we always tell people, keep copies of everything you send, and send it in a way that you can prove you sent it. So that's by either fax or email, if you're allowed to email it, or certified mail, keeping a copy, because you want to be able to document everything that you sent. And then you just have to be really on top of that process, even though it gets frustrating to resubmit documents. If they're asking for it again, you're not going to get through it. You're not going to have them actually review things until you send it the way they want it. Sometimes you'll get a letter from the mortgage company say, this comes up a lot for self-employed people. It's really hard to document your income if you're self-employed in a way that is satisfactory to one of these banks. They'll ask for a profit and loss statement, and you send in your best attempt at a profit and loss statement, that you've drawn up, and they may kick it back, and you may get a letter saying submit profit and loss, and you don't know why. If you call them, you can ask, what was wrong with the last one I sent? And it might be they wanted the date in a different format, or they wanted a quarterly one instead of a monthly one, or whatever it is. But you just have to keep on trying to get them all the documents that they need so that they will tell you, now your application is complete and it's going to the underwriter for review.
Okay, so how receptive are banks to this loan modification, and especially if they haven't yet fallen behind? It feels, I mean, maybe I'm wrong and I probably am, but it feels like usually, I know with consumer debt law, I had someone talking about this, an attorney talking about this a while ago, usually they become receptive after they realize they're not getting their money out of you. So how receptive are banks to this process?
Well, I think that banks will tell you they don't want to foreclose, and foreclosure is always their last resort. And to some extent, I think that's true. I mean, there are a variety of incentives at play here financially. But most banks will take these applications seriously. There is a little bit of variation, as Sarah was saying, depending on whether your loan is FHA or VA insured or owned by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. If you have one of those 4 types of loans, you're definitely in the best situation because there are specific rules that require the bank you're talking to do certain things. If your loan is just privately owned and not insured by any of those entities, it's really up to that specific bank what kinds of programs they're going to offer. There's nothing they're required to do, but most of them still have a process, and they will take this seriously.
Okay, so earlier you talked about scams, about companies that basically prey on people who are going through this process. Are there any companies that actually don't prey? Are there actually good companies that are actually out there to help you?
Well, I mentioned something before about housing counseling agencies, and that is the best recommendation I can give for if you're trying to get help. Obviously, we want you to call Atlanta Legal Aid, call the Home Defense Program, particularly if you're in the 5 counties that we serve in the Atlanta metro area. But if you're not in our service area or you know you're going to be over our income limit, then finding what we call a HUD certified housing counselor is your next best option. And you can find a list of those agencies on HUD.gov, or if you just Google HUD certified housing counselor. Basically, HUD, another federal agency, has a process of reviewing these nonprofits that do this kind of budget counseling and help for people who are facing foreclosure. So they're not attorneys, but they provide free assistance, and they are sort of experts on loan modifications. So they have contacts at Bank of America and Chase and Ocwen and all these different lenders. They know who to contact. They know what needs to go into the application packet, and they don't charge anything for their services. And really, they'll help anybody, regardless of your income level. So that is our usual recommendation. Almost pretty much every company that I can think of that charges money to help you get a loan modification, usually it's a scam. And why would you pay for something if you don't have to? But unfortunately, a lot of these companies are outright scammers where they will, a few red flags are they'll make a guarantee. They'll say, we guarantee that we can save your home and get you a loan modification. Let me tell you, nobody can guarantee you that you will get a loan modification. That is a false promise. That is false hope. It depends on a lot of factors. And so don't trust anyone who's saying, I guarantee it. Some of them will want you to sign paperwork in a way that's really aggressive, and they don't want you to take a minute to go have someone else read it. That's a red flag too. But, there are companies who will still try to trick you into signing over the deed to your house. And that's a traditional foreclosure rescue scam. If you have equity in your home and you're at risk of foreclosure, you have a giant target on your back. So you really need to be very skeptical of anybody who contacts you, anybody who sends you a mailer. You'll also get mailings from bankruptcy firms, and I know we'll talk about bankruptcy later. And, that's an option to consider. But all of the junk mail that you get from private companies who are charging a fee to save your home, you need to be very skeptical.
Okay, that's pretty good information. So we're up against a break here. One more time, why don't you give them some contact information for you guys?
So the best way to get to us is to go to atlantalegalaid.org, atlantalegalaid.org. That's our website. And look under Contact Us to find the office in the county where you live. If you prefer to reach out by phone, you can call 770-817-7520.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law. I have attorney Sarah Kelsey and Sarah Mancini on with me from Atlanta Legal Aid, and we're talking mortgage foreclosure defense. And I am having the worst time with the word mortgage today, and I'm not really quite sure because I just did a closing earlier, and I had to talk about mortgage through the whole thing. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. We'll be back in a minute. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am here with you each and every single week to empower you, the listener, with legal information. If you have a serious legal problem, don't rely on the information you hear on this show. Go ahead and seek the advice of an attorney. You can always contact me if you can't find an attorney. I can help you find an attorney. I may be able to help you with your legal issue if it's in a certain area. I actually happen to be an attorney. But anyways, don't rely on this show. This show is just designed to give you information. We are here to empower you, the listener. This show is all about empowerment. You can contact me at my website, jameslewislegal.com, email me at james@jameslewislegal, or give me a phone call at 404-610-0075. I have attorneys Sarah Kelsey and Sarah Mancini on with me from Atlanta Legal Aid, and we are talking home defense, mortgage foreclosure defense. So when we last left off, we were talking loan modification, loss mitigation. What other kinds of things can they do here to help slow down this process? Or maybe wait a minute, why don't we give them a recap? Because I think we went through a lot of information there. So why don't we just go through where we've been?
Yeah. So just to hit some of the main points that we want folks to take away, the number one thing is that when you're falling behind on your mortgage or worried about falling behind, there are options to keep you in your home. But the most important thing you can do is act quickly. Contact your mortgage company, ask for help, and apply for a loan modification or one of the other options that we're going to talk about next. But the sooner you act on it, the better. And to be aware that there are some protections under federal law. You have at least 120 days until you get to be 4 payments behind. They're not allowed to initiate the foreclosure process. But once they do initiate the foreclosure process under Georgia law, it's very fast. We're talking a 30-day notice letter, and those sales happen the first Tuesday of the month. So really, you want to act quickly to try to get help.
Okay, so what other types of alternatives do they have here? What haven't we talked about yet?
So one other option is a forbearance, and that means that for a period of time, and it can be, I think, up to 12 months sometimes, so it may be shorter, you don't make the mortgage payment. But the important thing to remember is that at the end of the forbearance period, all of those payments are due. So at that point, if you're not able to pay all of those payments, you might look into another option, such as a repayment plan, which I'll talk about next, or applying for a loan modification. So one thing, if you know you're about to be in default and it seems to be a temporary hardship, such as unemployment or a medical issue, you can call up the mortgage company and let them know, and you can ask for a forbearance.
Now, how likely is a forbearance? I mean, is that something that's common? Is that something that's likely to be granted, or is it something that's rare?
I think it depends on the mortgage company. It depends also on what type of loan it is. The FHA insured loans, they do have forbearance programs, and so do VA insured loans.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to know here is it's meant to help you if you have a temporary hardship, like a job loss especially, because if you have zero income right now, you cannot get a loan modification because the bank wants to see that you have the ability to make some payment in order for them to do a modification. But that's exactly what a forbearance is for, is to give you a spell of time to get reemployed. So a forbearance might mean zero payment or it might mean a reduced payment, but it's temporary. And at the end, whatever else you owe comes due.
So
That's
everything
right.
else that you owe for that year, for the period that you were in forbearance.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it all becomes due at once.
Okay, that's pretty important because that could become a huge nut to crack, basically.
Mhm.
That's right, because even if your temporary hardship is over, let's say you get reemployed, that doesn't mean you have a year's worth of mortgage payments that you can make all at once. So that's when it's a good time to call the bank and look into other options. So one option is a repayment plan, and that is pretty much what it sounds like. You've fallen behind to some extent, or you have a forbearance that's now due, and you can't pay it all at once, but you can pay some of it. So typically there will be a down payment, and then for a period of time, usually about 6 months, sometimes up to 12 months, you will make your regular mortgage payment as well as a repayment amount, some repayment plan amount.
Okay, so earlier you guys were talking about Home Safe Georgia. What is that?
Yeah, so this is another program that we really want to make sure people know about. And they have, Home Safe Georgia is a program run by the state of Georgia through the Department of Community Affairs. And one of the things they have is a reinstatement program. So if you were someone who was in a forbearance, because you were unemployed and then you got reemployed and you had good income, but you needed help catching up on those missed payments. Home Safe Georgia is designed to do exactly that. That's one of their big programs, is reinstatement assistance to bring your mortgage current, but you have to have good income now in order to get it. And basically, this is a program run through the state of Georgia, but using federal money. So we were designated as a hardest hit state that was hardest hit by the foreclosure crisis and the unemployment crisis. So we got this federal money to create this program. And the state is giving out this money to people once you document that you have a hardship that caused you to fall behind on your mortgage. But it's basically done as a forgivable loan. So they will make your mortgage payment. They will send the bank, I think it's up to 24 months of payments to bring you current if you qualify for that program. And they take a second mortgage on the house, but it's what you call a silent second mortgage. You don't make any payments. And if you continue to live there for 5 more years, it's totally forgiven. So it's a great program. So few people know about it. The best way to apply is to go to homesafegeorgia.org. And that's the website to apply. And they have more information about their eligibility rules. There's another program under Home Safe Georgia, which is called the Underwater Georgia program. And for that one, you don't have to be behind on your mortgage at all. But if you know that you owe more on the mortgage than your house is worth, you can get a one-time lump sum payment to reduce the balance that you owe and hopefully get you to that break-even point where you can start to build equity. And again, it's a forgivable loan from the state that if you live there for 5 more years, you never have to pay it back.
That's incredible. Forgivable loans. That's something people really need to know. Now, one more time, talk about how they can find out about this. They just Google it.
Go to the website homesafegeorgia.org, and that has all the eligibility rules because there are some more specific details. And you apply through that website, and then they will call you and follow up with you. And if you have trouble applying for Home Safe Georgia, that's another thing that you can call legal aid about. Call the Home Defense Program for help.
Okay, sounds like legal aid is your place to go. If you have any of these types of issues, if you have civil issues going on, just contact you guys and kind of get pointed in the right direction, right?
That's
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, so earlier you talked about bankruptcy. How can bankruptcy help you with this problem?
So bankruptcy is another option to consider if you're struggling with your mortgage or you've already fallen behind. It's sort of like a repayment plan, but it allows you to force a repayment plan, even if the bank doesn't want to allow you to do it. And I should say, just to clarify, and I know you had another show on bankruptcy previously, so people can get more information.
Oh, it's okay. You can go ahead and just get into it. I mean, there's no problem with repeating information and really getting this information out.
That's good. But there is a lot of detail, so I would encourage people to listen to that episode too. But for homeowners, so there's 2 different kinds of bankruptcy for individuals, a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is what we call a liquidation bankruptcy, and it's best for people who have a lot of unsecured debt, like credit card debt, medical debt, things like that. It allows you to wipe out that unsecured debt. But a Chapter 7 bankruptcy is not a good option for a homeowner who's trying to save their home, because if you have a secured creditor, like a mortgage company, and when I say secured, I mean they have a lien, they have an interest in your house where if you don't pay, they have the right to foreclose. That type of creditor, that lien that they have passes right through the Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So if you're not able to get caught up, they will still have the right to foreclose. Filing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy can stop a foreclosure temporarily, but in the long run, unless you're able to catch up all those payments, they're still going to be allowed to foreclose once they get permission from the bankruptcy court or after your bankruptcy case is over. A Chapter 13 bankruptcy, on the other hand, is what we call a repayment plan bankruptcy. And it allows you to restructure your debts, and basically you enter into a monthly payment plan with the bankruptcy trustee. So if you're, let's say, $10,000 behind on your mortgage and you file bankruptcy, first of all, there's something called the automatic stay that says even if you file bankruptcy the day before a foreclosure sale, the creditor is not allowed to foreclose unless they get court permission.
Wow, that is really important.
Even the day before, exactly. But the important thing is, if you file repeated bankruptcies, you can lose that protection. But if it's your first bankruptcy filing, you've got that, and it's a huge protection. And then you propose this payment plan where you say, all right, I'm $10,000 behind. I'm going to make monthly payments for the next 5 years to catch up that arrearage. And at the same time, I'm going to start making my regular payment on time. So it's only a good option if you can afford to start making your regular payment on time plus that extra amount to the bankruptcy court. But if you can do that, a Chapter 13 bankruptcy will allow you to keep the house.
Wow, that's incredible. That's great stuff. So real quickly, why don't you talk? I think you wanted to talk about some other areas that Atlanta Legal Aid will help people in.
Sure. So the home defense program is really focused on home ownership and helping people avoid threats to home ownership. We do help people with property tax appeals and other threats to home ownership. And then legal aid in general, it's any type of civil case, whether it's a debt collection, a family law issue. We really cover a lot of areas.
Okay, one more time, give them some contact information for Atlanta Legal Aid and the home defense program.
So our website is www.atlantalegalAid.org. And you can also call 770-817-7520.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law, and that is all of the time we have for you today. I'd like to thank Attorney Sarah Kelsey and Attorney Sarah Mancini from Atlanta Legal Aid for coming on and talking about mortgage foreclosure defense. I would also like to thank my producers, my wonderful producer, Sam Davis over here with the controls at the audio, and our multimedia producer, Anthony Cook over there, making sure the video looks great, getting my pretty side. That's right. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. I will be back next week, and we're going to talk about a program for attorneys and for people who might not meet the threshold for Atlanta Legal Aid. It's called Lawyers for Equal Justice. Once again, you're listening to Lewis on the Law. Thank you, guys.